Hi, everyone. I'm Justin Golston, and welcome to the conversation on supply chain management. If I were to sum up supply chain management, I would say it is the process to take a product from concept to consumer. Let's look at supply chain management through the lens of Apple. Let's say that Apple is releasing a new product, and once they bring in a cross-functional team that agrees to the aesthetics and features of the new iPhone, then all of those requirements are then sent to engineering. The engineers will then develop a prototype, and from that prototype, they will create a bill of material, which are the list of all raw materials and sub-assemblies that would go into that iPhone. And they would create a bill of routing, which are the steps to create the iPhone, to create the finished product. Once they have all that information, they will then load that information within their enterprise resource planning application, and then they would push this data to the scheduling team, which is part of production or manufacturing. So before they would put in an order, a manufacturing order for the iPhones, if we haven't produced it yet, how do we know how many to create? Many companies use different approaches, but the baseline for a new product would be companies would look at a similar product, and in Apple's case, they would look at the previous iPhone. So they would look at the first week or first month sales for the previous iPhone, and then they would add additional metrics such as seasonality. Are we releasing this during Christmas? Are we releasing it once everyone receives their tax returns? We also have how the economy's doing. Was the economy on a downturn during the release of the last iPhone? Are we in a better financial situation or economic situation at this point during the release? So there are many inputs to decide upon how many iPhones to actually produce. Once they put in the manufacturing order, then the information is then sent to purchasing. So purchasing will then look at the bill of material, which engineering input within the ERP system, and they will look to source or find suppliers or vendors to purchase the raw materials and sub-assemblies from. Once all that information is input within the ERP application, they then, instead of manually deciding what products that they need to purchase and when, most companies have a tool called material requirements planning that will take the demand, the production demand, and kind of explode it down to all raw material parts and sub-assemblies to help purchasing to decide how much to order. Once purchasing has ordered those parts will then be distributed among all production facilities for Apple, and then production will begin. Once production is as finished goods are completed throughout the process, then these finished goods will go through logistics, and the logistics department will send these finished goods out to the distribution centers throughout the world in anticipation for the Apple iPhone release. Though that seemed like a lot of steps, that was a 50,000 foot perfect scenario from a supply chain management perspective. Within supply chain, there are many supply chain disruptions. We have situations such as supplier quality, which you have learned about in this course. We have logistical issues where product may be damaged in transit or the product may be late. So going back to the production scenario, if we have production planned for a number of iPhones, but one of the materials are late, that could potentially shut down production until that material actually gets there. And then we also have natural disasters of acts of God. We've seen plenty of the natural disaster issues last year, and that created a number of supply chain disruptions for Puerto Rico, Texas, as well as California. Even though we have a number of mitigation strategies that we could implement, one strategy that I have implemented would be collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment, also known as CPFR. In a nutshell, CPFR is primarily the collaboration of all business partners throughout both upstream and downstream throughout the supply chain. Whenever I discuss upstream and downstream, think about a water faucet. As the water flows down, the product will be flowing downstream, okay? Within collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment, we kind of flip it on its head, and we take the information and the data from the end customer, and we move it upstream all the way to the supplier. In collaborating and sharing this information, we ultimately reduce what we call the bullwhip effect. So if you think about a whip, you have all these peaks and valleys, and that can be similar to peaks in demand, okay? If we have those peaks and lulls in demand, that leads to stockouts for organizations, as well as excess inventory, which amounts to increased costs, increased holding costs, and things of that nature. If you want to look at additional information in terms of CPFR, one fun thing is to go on YouTube and look up the beer game. The beer game was created by professors at MIT to demonstrate supply chain management and the bullwhip effect. And it's more of a team collaborative approach where you have the retailer, you have the wholesaler, you have the wholesaler, you have the distributor, the manufacturer, and the supplier. So within these groups, each group will put in their demand throughout each round. And then at the end of the round, the facilitator will actually present to the group the results of what the demand was for the customer. So you'll go through multiple iterations, and after each round, you're scored on how many stockouts you have, and what your excess inventory is, as well as other metrics. So you'll go through multiple rounds to get the result. And then in the second group, you actually collaborate with all teams. So you'll discuss with the customer on what do you think the demand is going to be, okay? And then you'll discuss that all the way up to the supplier. So the result of this exercise will be you'll have that bullwhip effect during the first iteration, but once you introduce the collaboration piece, you'll see that bullwhip kind of flattens out a little bit. With that, I hope that you found this presentation beneficial, and have a good night.